the end of the session for taking up the queries. I'm there at your call. All the best. Go ahead, sir.
Sure. Thanks, Sunil. And apologies for that technical glitch.
No, not an issue. It's from my side. My system was giving me some unexpected error today.
Okay.
So
Okay.
please go ahead.
Yeah, sure. So, yes. So I will be asking from you what we mean by a contract. So as any standard law book will answer that, any agreement which is enforceable by law becomes a contract. So my question to everybody is that whether conducting this webinar will be qualified as a contract or not. So I would request each one of you to answer in the chat box. So there is a chat box beneath. That whether this webinar will be qualified for a contract or not.
Well, it is a type of agreement nonetheless.
Yes, so I wanted participants to actually answer that, Sunil, so that
Great.
I find them engaged in the session.
Yeah.
Right. I'm getting replies. So Muskan is answering no.
Yes.
Aniket is saying no.
No. Okay.
Sunil, you can keep track of those answers for my understanding.
Cool. I'm just keeping track. Yeah. Karen Sabai says to everyone, yes, it is. Yes. No, sir. Manik Gaba. So there are mixed replies we are getting.
Yeah.
Based
one
on
of them,
how
Mohit has replied that if there is a consideration,
yeah.
then it becomes a contract. That's absolutely right.
That's absolutely right.
It is only an agreement till the time it is enforceable by law. And since in the absence of any consideration, it could not be enforced by law.
Exactly.
So hence it is not a contract. And if I refused, or if the Lovely Professional University decided to cancel this webinar for reasons best known to either party, then we could not have sued each other for the damages. Right?
Right.
Because this is an agreement, and this agreement is not enforceable by law, hence it does not take the shape of a contract. So like an agreement to have a dinner, agreement to go for a walk, all these are agreements until and unless they become enforceable by law. Then they will become contracts.
In the hindsight, Gagan, actually just taking a moment here, and I believe all our participants are from the law field, and it includes faculty members. I welcome faculty members. I can see Madam Dalyandeep is also here. So I welcome you also, ma'am. And I believe especially the faculty members of the present era would relate to their classes. I have gone back to my contract classes. You would remember, Gagan, in Faculty of Law, like it used to be so exciting talking about such things as to whether if you take out someone for dinner, whether it's a contract or enforceable or not. So it's really very interesting.
Right. So now we look into the ingredients for a valid contract. That what are the basic ingredients for any contract to be valid contract? So the contract should be between at least two persons. You can have more than two persons. That's called a multi-party contract. There should be an offer. Like Lovely Professional University gave me an offer that kindly conduct webinar for us. I heartily accepted that offer. So there was an offer, there was an acceptance, right? So there was an intention to create a legal. Both of us wanted a lawful object. Our object is to conduct this workshop to make students understand the nuances of the contract, what goes behind drafting of a contract. Both of us were competent to enter into this relationship. Lovely Professional University is nationally known university. I am a practicing advocate. So both of us are competent to enter into this relationship. the contract was not void. A void, I will go into what is void in my next few slides. Then whether there was a lawful consideration or not. In present case, we did not have any consideration. Suppose there was a consideration, then it would have taken the form of a contract. There was free consent. I did not force Lovely Professional University to invite me. They did not force me to conduct this webinar. Both had free consent. The object of both the parties was lawful, to make students aware what are the ingredients of a contract, what goes behind drafting of a contract, what should be kept in mind while drafting a contract. And then there was a certainty of terms and conditions. It was certain that it is going to be held on 15th of May at 5 p.m. and at Zoom. The ID and the password would be shared in advance. So these terms and conditions were known to each other beforehand. So that is what is required for a contract. Now suppose both Sunil and me enter into an agreement to kill somebody. Then we have everything. It is not a contract. Why? Because there is no lawful object. The object is unlawful. The intent to create a relationship is not legal. We are entering into an illegal relationship. Right? Now we look into when agreements actually become contract. Agreements which are enforceable by law, they become contracts. Now, all the contracts that they are agreements, whereas all agreements are not contracts. As I explained to you earlier as also, that there should be a lawful object, the party should be competent, there should be free consent, there should be an offer, there should be acceptance, there should be certainty of terms and conditions. So we will see that what we mean by terms and conditions, and terms and conditions actually vary from case to case basis. Like in case of an employer and employee, you will have a different set of terms and conditions. In case of landlord and tenant, you will have a different set of terms and conditions. In case of commercial contracts between a supplier and a buyer, you will have totally different set of terms and conditions. So it will depend on a case to case basis. That is why drafting of a contract is both science as well as an art. Science, that you have to keep all technicalities in mind before you start drafting a contract. And art, it is how you draft that contract. The language which has been used in drafting, whether the one paragraph is connected to the previous paragraph or not, whether there is flow of thought process or not, whether all the possibilities have been contemplated or not, all these things, they fall, that is an art, and that we learn as we draft more and more contracts. Now, what is void and voidable contract? Void contract is no contract at all actually. So if Sunil and me enter into a contract to kill somebody, that's actually not a contract, and that is void ab initio. Ab initio, from the beginning. From the beginning we had ill intention, so that cannot be considered as a void. That is considered as a void contract. Now, what is voidable contract? Voidable contract is a contract which becomes void at the discretion of either party. Now, supplier and buyer enter into a contract, and the buyer later on comes to know that the goods have been supplied based on misrepresentation of facts. So actually the supplier has played fraud with the buyer. So buyer has the discretion to actually terminate the contract, and that contract is actually known as voidable. That will be at the discretion of the buyer, whether he wants to terminate that contract or not. Now comes the crema de lime of today's time, that is force majeure. Everybody is talking about force majeure. Why? What is force majeure? When can it be invoked? What are the ingredients of the force majeure? What are the consequences of the force majeure? That we will look into those aspects. Now, COVID-19 situation, it has been declared as a force majeure event already by the government. So there remains no contention that whether COVID-19 will qualify as a force majeure event or not. Now, in most of the contracts, there is a clause force majeure. Now, force majeure means that when any party is prohibited or is hindered from performing its obligation due to the conditions which are beyond his or her control. So now this clause it could arise from a natural calamity, that is earthquake, flood, tsunami. It could arise from a warlike situation, or it could be due to change in the policy of the government. Then it could be due to riots as we were witnessing in the recent past, or it could be due to strike of employees in the organization. So this is something due to which the organization or the party to the contract is not able to discharge his obligations. Then that party actually invokes this clause. The party who is affected actually has to inform the other party by means of a notice that, here, look boss, I am not able to discharge my obligation because I am being hindered, I am being prohibited from performance due to the conditions which are beyond my control. So hence, the consequence thus follows is that the affected party could actually either suspend the contract, could actually terminate the contract, or the affected party could enter into a renegotiation or reforming the contract or restructuring the contract. Now, in the recent case of Bombay High Court, I give you an example where an importer of steel actually approached the Bombay High Court invoking the force majeure clause, asking for a relief from the court that I am not able to discharge my financial obligations of the payment to my different vendors due to COVID-19. Hence, kindly help me invoking force majeure clause. The court held that the steel is an essential commodity. There is no prohibition, there is no hindrance whatsoever to that particular importer from the distribution of the steel. Now, the suppliers have supplied the steel is lying at the shore. There is no problem, there is no hindrance that the importer should not discharge his financial obligations. So the force majeure clause actually should not become the tool to escape the liability of any party to the contract. Becomes overburdened, or if the profitability is reduced by virtue of any condition which is beyond the control of either parties, then this clause will not be invoked. The profitability or overburdening of a contract will not come under the purview of force majeure clause. So hence, this clause has to be looked from a case to case basis. It will vary from facts to facts. While Delhi High Court, in another case, in the case of Halliburton Services Private Limited versus Vedanta, here Vedanta Limited engaged Halliburton for the drilling of oil, and Halliburton took the excuse of force majeure, saying that I am not able to send my workers for the drilling. Hence, I am invoking this clause to overcome my obligations. And Vedanta actually wanted to invoke the bank guarantee which was given by Halliburton in the light of not being able to discharge the obligations under the contract. So the Delhi High Court said that this event is a force majeure event. There is hindrance to Halliburton Services in discharge of his obligations. Hence, the bank guarantee given by Halliburton to Vedanta should not be invoked until the lockdown period is over. Now, what is the difference between force majeure and frustration of contract? Force majeure is actually a Roman concept, whereas frustration of contract is an Indian concept. You will not find force majeure in Indian Contract Act. Whereas Section 56 of the Indian Contract Act defines what is frustration of a contract. When actually the contract is frustrated, or when there are conditions beyond the control of either parties that they are not able to perform the contract, then you actually can invoke Section 56. For example, if there was an event, if Lovely Professional University had organized this seminar instead of webinar, then I would have invoked frustration of contract, because during lockdown I could not have conducted this seminar at the campus of Lovely Professional University. So the contract actually would have become frustrated. The objective of the contract, that was to conduct seminar with the students of Lovely Professional University, would have been defeated. So that is the difference between a force majeure and a frustration of contract. So now we look into few examples of different relationships. What is to be kept in mind while we draft the contract in these conditions, and then it actually varies from case to case basis. You cannot have one template which will be fit size, one size fit for all. So like in case of employer and employee, you have to decide what will be the place of work, what will be the job description of an employee, what will be the probationary period, duration of that period, when will he be made permanent, whom he will be reporting to, what will be his working hours, then what kind of leaves will he be entitled to, sick leave, casual leave, paid leave, then method of payment, whether he will be paid through check, whether he will be paid through online, then termination clause. Termination clause is one clause which is universal, which goes across all the contracts. So that this clause you will find in every contract on this planet Earth. So one should be very careful in drafting of this clause, because this is the clause which gives you an option to exit a legal relationship, and how actually you exit that legal relationship will depend on what are the consequences of that termination, which we are going to discuss subsequently. Then one more clause which is dispute related. So this clause also you will find it universally across all the contracts, that in case of a dispute, how will that dispute be resolved? Whether there will be an arbitration or whether there will be a court proceeding, that has to be decided in this dispute clause. Now we look into a lease agreement. So this is a relationship between a landlord and a tenant. So it will have clauses which govern the relationship between a landlord and a tenant. It will have landlord will describe the property, that okay, it's XYZ property that has been given on rent, the particulars of that property, it is measuring so and so much in area, it has so many floors, it is surrounded by so and so property number. Then you will have a security deposit condition, then you will have a forfeiture condition, then what will be the rent, when will rent be paid, what will be the mode of the payment of the rent, then penalty clause if the rent is not paid on time, then when can this contract be terminated, that's a termination clause, and then you may have a pandemic clause. Now people have become cautious after COVID-19. So even if there was no contract with force majeure clause, people are having that clause with specific provision of pandemic. Although the government has declared COVID-19 as force majeure event, what if it was not declared as force majeure event? Then it would have been decided by the language of that clause, whether the word pandemic has been used in that clause or not. And then termination clause. that when will be the property handed over back if that contract is terminated, how will the arrears be adjusted, what will happen to the security paid by the tenant. So actually, in nutshell, what does contract do? Contract actually puts the rights and duties of each party on a piece of paper, so that both of them, they know that how they have to function during the course of the contract, that these are my rights and these are my duties. So if any party violates, then the other party can show that, look boss, this is what you committed to when we entered into this relationship, and this is what you're doing with that.
Gagan sir, I would just
Yeah.
briefly take a minute. Just wanted to like perhaps a bit more elaboration on the aspect of the pandemic clause, because we have already understood, and I believe the attendees must also be clear on the aspect of the majority clause is something unforeseen happening beyond the control of human agency, and then it is having an impact on the performance obligation of the party, of the contracting party.
Correct.
Now, pandemic clause is something now, like as you said, that this government has notified it as a disaster. It has invoked National Disaster Management Act and plus several other notifications and have been passed in this regard with regard to contractual obligations. So it is seen as a force majeure clause. So where for temporary time period, the performance may be postponed. Am I correct?
Yes, actually there are three ways of addressing this,
Looking.
looking
Okay.
at this clause.
Hmm.
One is that
Hmm.
the affected party can actually terminate the contract. It could
Okay.
say that I am not in a position to discharge the obligations, and hence I terminate the contract.
All
That is
right.
the worst case scenario which can happen actually.
Okay.
The other option is the affected party can suspend the contract. The affected
Okay.
party can say, okay, I am not able to discharge my obligation, so I'm suspending my obligations for a particular time period till the
Okay.
time the things become normal. So that
Okay.
is the other way of looking at it. Now,
Uh, hmm.
third aspect is that the affected party can actually restructure or reform the contract. It can renegotiate with the other party that, okay, there is a situation outside, so I want to renegotiate with you the terms of the contract. So these are the three options which are available to the affected party while he or she is invoking this clause.
Okay. Now, this pandemic clause, as you pointed out, is this something which the companies or people are already including in the contract right now,
Yes.
because
So
they are already
this
doing it?
the word pandemic was being used in previously in the force majeure clause in the contracts, but
Okay.
now this has become, now people have become actually cautious. They are more aware of this. They are cognizant of this fact that, okay, I have to keep this clause in mind, and while keeping this clause in mind, not I will make sure that I use the word pandemic in that
Okay.
clause, which
All
perhaps
right.
which perhaps could have been missed out earlier before the COVID-19 situation.
Okay. Okay. Fine. Thank you.
Now, uh, I'm going to talk about the difference between lease and license. So, lease actually gives right to the lessee in the property, whereas license, it does not give you right in the property. So, license is something which can be revoked anytime, and lease actually has is terminated, but the lessee can continue to be in their property. So you have to actually, the termination of lease takes through a proper lawful mechanism, that is by eviction of the tenant, whereas license can be terminated and withdrawn at the pleasure of the grantor. The lease is actually inheritable and is transferable, whereas license is person specific. The person to whom you have given that particular license, he or she only can enjoy that. It cannot be transferred to his or her successor. So people usually get mistaken between a lease and a license. So what now will decide whether the contract was a lease or whether the contract was a license? Actually, it will be decided by the nature of language. By the You cannot have a lease under the guise of a license. So the nature of your contract will actually decide that what is the difference between a lease and license. Now we come to commercial contracts, that is contracts between a buyer and a supplier. So here we have clauses which will pertain to the sale and purchase of goods, the confidentiality clause that nobody will reveal the design, the intellectual property with respect to that particular product. There will be methods of payment defined in that contract, that when or what will be the schedule of my payment, how much credit will be given to me, the warranty conditions, and then we will have a force majeure clause as well. Termination clause, as I mentioned, will be universal across all the contracts. So these two clauses goes without saying. One is termination clause, other is a dispute clause. So the jurisdiction of dispute, how the dispute will be addressed. Then you will have a damages clause, that if any damage takes place, any damage happens to my good, then who will bear, and how, whether the damages will be quantified, whether there will be compensation to that damages, or whether there will be any punitive damages also. So all these aspects will be covered under the commercial contracts. And then as I started before you joined, Sunil, I was sharing with them that what things as a law student one should keep in mind while drafting a
Right.
contract.
Right.
So the contract should be very precise. There should be no ambiguity
Definitely.
whatsoever in the
Definitely.
drafting of a contract. One should avoid using jargons, redundant words which makes no sense or which have double meaning, in order to avoid multiple interpretations. Because what is going to happen in case of a dispute, those words, those jargons will be misused by the other party. So it is incumbent upon both the parties to avoid having any ambiguity, or to leave any room for interpretation, I would say. The more room you give for interpretation, more options you will open up for dispute. As I earlier discussed also, there should be certainty of terms and conditions. The terms and conditions should not be open-ended. Precise, it should be defined, it should be quantified, so that both the parties know that what is in store for each of them. For example, if I have mentioned that the other party, in case of non-payment of rent, will have to pay damages, then damages should be defined in that clause. Then the clauses should not run into multiple sentences. It should have single sentence, short sentence, so that it is easy to comprehend. If anybody is reading that contract, the person should be able to comprehend. One should avoid getting into long sentences. Then there should be mutual understanding between both the parties. If anything has been left out, the other party should point out, because eventually both the parties are going to suffer because of any dispute in future. So it is incumbent upon both the parties to have understanding with respect to each and every clause which has been
Right.
mentioned in the contract. Then the important aspect is that there should be a connection between the first clause and the second clause. That is that there should be a flow, that one clause should flow from the previous clause. Suppose you are drafting a contract between a landlord and tenant. If you are mentioning about the payment of rent, then you will not straight away jump to dispute resolution, because then it will not be in the flow. It will be out of the flow. So one should keep that in mind while drafting that contract. Then important point is dispute resolution. Since this clause is inevitable this clause is universal. Hence, lot of emphasis should be given to this clause, that how the parties to the contract are going to resolve the dispute. What will happen if either party raises any dispute, or what will happen if there is an unforeseeable circumstances which neither party contemplated at the beginning, or which could not be foreseen, something which is beyond the control, then what will happen to that situation? So that should be clearly laid down. With this, I would thank all the participants who took out their valuable time and joined us for this discussion. And I hope that they would have found this productive and informative, and they will incorporate some of the things which they will take away from this discussion while drafting the contract. Thank you, Sunil.
Yeah, fine. I think, Gagan, that's very, very lucid, and it's a very to the point and very specific discussion on the very practical aspects of contract drafting. However, coming up now, we have a number of participants with us, and normally there is a lot of air about this. I have realized that with regard to contract drafting, and there is a lot of confusion also. And sometimes students tend to feel that maybe it is something very complex, and maybe it is something which is too difficult to understand. But however, as you have tried to point it out through case examples and through very clear-cut enunciation of the principles of contract drafting, that if these particular principles are followed, then the whole exercise of the contract drafting becomes easy. And there are different clauses, and I believe standard law textbooks related to contract law and in universities across India, especially whichsoever author you pick it up, you may find standard form of contracts, and then you have the form of government contracts, etc. That is part of the textual study which all the students go into in their classroom. But what I believe was different here today in the discussion is that you could stress the point, number one, that it should be clear and unambiguous. And in the wake of the scenarios like COVID, you have also tried to very in a very nuanced manner touch upon the distinction between the pandemic clause and its relationship with the force majeure clause. That is, it is being part of the force majeure clause only, and which the companies or the people are now anticipating to incorporate in the contracts which they are going to design for their purposes. There are certain questions popping up here, so I think we can take it up one by one. I can see there is one question for Namandeep, Mr. Namandeep, and he's saying whether the landlord can claim rent amount from lessee in case of absence of pandemic clause in lease agreement. Gagan,
Yes,
sir?
yeah, that's a very important question
Right, sir.
in the given circumstances, and many landlords would have that in mind. Since the government has already declared this event as a force majeure event,
Right, sir.
so yes, the landlord can claim the rent from the lessee even in the absence of this clause.
Okay. Fine. Actually, I also came through a bit different question from my side. It was coming. I was reading in the newspaper, Gagan sir, that many of the tenants from the Jalandhar district of Punjab, there was a news report in one of the leading English newspapers of the region, the Tribune. It reported that there are many migrants who were reportedly living on paying rent and living, like just any rental accommodation which anyone can avail, and they were not able to pay the rent, obviously due to loss of job, you can say, due to loss of livelihood for the time being, due to this emergency which no one could foresee, and it emerged. So they were compelled to leave their houses. Now, I was just wondering that in this scenario, like normally when we enter into a rent agreement, like do rent agreements also should have something like a force majeure clause? Ideally, these agreements have, or or can this person who was just not allowed to stay for a while because of certain emergency, like the COVID, he could not pay up? Is there any relief he can get, or what is the outcome going to be?
Uh, yeah, Sunil, there are multiple dimensions to what you have actually asked. First thing is that you can have this clause between a landlord and a tenant, and
Okay.
actually it will
Yeah.
depend on the situation.
Okay.
If there is a right like situation, or if there is, let's say, warlike situation, then obviously the tenant would not be in a position to discharge his financial obligation.
Right.
Or even if the landlord is able to give the premises for utilizing to the tenant, then whether the tenant is actually able to discharge his obligation or not, that has to be seen. That is the deciding yardstick. That whether
Okay.
the affected party, which who will be tenant in this case, is actually prohibited or is actually hindered from discharging his obligation or not. What is his obligation? His obligation is to pay the rent on time. And
Yes.
what is the
Yes.
obligation of a landlord? That obligation of landlord is to give the peaceful
Right.
possession of property to the tenant.
To tenant.
So landlord has discharged his obligation by giving that property.
Right.
Now the question which comes to anybody's mind is that whether the tenant, it has to be seen from a case to case basis. Suppose your tenant is a pharmaceutical company or your tenant is a hospital, then obviously he cannot invoke this force majeure clause because he is minting money during this time. So he cannot take an excuse of force majeure clause and say, I will not pay you any rent. Sorry, boss. So that has to be dealt from on a case to case basis.
I
I hope.
understand. Yes. Yeah, yeah. Yes. I hope I understand the obligations and the case specific scenario also. But what really bothered me was the point that in because these are private nature. You know, the nature of the contract is private. These are
Correct.
private contract between a landlord and a tenant, and this person cannot pay up. And in the case of a pharmaceutical company, he or she may still shore up some money at least to pay some part of it, or can enter into some sort of settlement further, or they may even modify the rent agreement. So those are certain circumstances which can come up. But what bothered me was that there's a person who is a migrant labor. He has a limited source of income. That income is gone due to COVID pandemic. Of course, there could have been a pandemic clause, but it was not there. Nobody could see it. But then to deny him, is contract law bereft of any humanitarian aspect, or are
Then
there
what
no
we
other
could,
considerations which come into?
yeah, Sunil, I got what you are saying actually. In that situation, what will come to rescue is frustration of contract.
Okay.
Because in that situation, the migrant worker, the objective of the contract is actually frustrated. That he is not able to earn so much that he can pay the rent to the landlord.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
even in the absence of a force majeure clause, he can rely upon Section 56 of the Indian Contract Act.
That he could not simply produce a job and he could not pay up. So whenever situation resumes, he may work and maybe pay up his dues.
Yeah, in that case, the migrant worker or the tenant, I would say, can actually suspend the contract, ask for the suspension of the payment of the rent, can
Hmm.
ask for moratorium like the banks are giving.
Yeah,
Or
something like that maybe.
yes, or
Hmm.
third option is that he can ask for restructuring of the rent. That
Yeah,
would be that
exactly.
would be reforming the contract.
Exactly. Exactly.
So where all the
So
previous terms and conditions will be overwritten by the new terms and conditions.
right, right. So I think this is the way it could be done. But obviously, I believe due to a lot of challenges, maybe they are not so well aware, or they do not have access to legal aid of such a kind that they can actually, in a real situation on the ground, we know that things are very point to point, and it's very point blank. So anyhow, this is a scenario, and I was just looking and thinking about such cases. And good, thank you for the insights. And I believe you are also correct when you point out that we can look for certain alternatives within the four corners of the contract law, like the frustration of contract, and maybe we can ask for suspension, moratorium, and a delayed payment.
Correct.
So that So I think that's a very valid solution. And I believe courts are not restrained from looking into those options also.
Yes, yes, yes. On the contrary, courts will encourage that
Yes.
since it's very difficult to approach courts during this time, so courts would be more than happy if landlord and tenant they mutually decide the future course of action.
Actually, there was such a big, I'm just trying to relate it to the national events also happening, and that there were so many large migration, especially from states like Punjab and Haryana. There is a lakhs of migrant populations have moved out, and especially as per the government records, which was reported in the media, almost 6.5 lakh migrants had registered themselves to be um, to avail the government facility of trains to go back to their homelands, and due to multiple reasons. And I believe at least half of them must be living in some sort of contractual obligation, in some tenements, in some sort of residential places whatsoever. But I was really surprised to see that I felt that there was no clear-cut direction by the government or something like the moratorium, because en masse, even if government could have given some sort of direction. Do you think government is empowered to issue some sort of clear notification in this regard to private persons also?
Uh,
Can government do so?
Sunil, there was a notification with respect to payment of wages by the government,
Right,
but there has been no such notification with
with
respect to
regard to
with
tenants,
regard to payment of rent.
right.
Yeah.
Fine. I think, yeah. I get it. But anyhow, we can carry this further separately. There are questions coming up, so I will like to take that up.
Sure, Sunil.
I have taken up a lot of time for my own query. Anyhow, sir, you explained earlier in a certain case that if profitability is reduced, then force majeure cannot be invoked. Please explain that again. This is from Karen Sabai, an international student with us, Gagan sir.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's a very, very good question. What I meant was that suppose there is increase in oil price, and as my obligation in the contract was to supply oil to the other party. Now that will obviously reduce my profitability. Now I cannot invoke this clause and tell the other party that sorry boss, you hold on for the time till the oil prices fall down because it has affected my profitability. I cannot take that excuse. Similarly, drawing an analogy, the tenants cannot take an excuse that since there is no business, so we will not pay you rent because it is going to obviously affect their profitability. Nobody is questioning that. But then this clause is not meant for that. The purpose of this clause is actually to safeguard the events which are beyond the control of anybody, like floods, like earthquake. So that is a thin line of difference when you actually invoke force majeure and when you do not or when you cannot invoke force majeure. So, and the essential ingredient for that is that you should be prohibited. Now, there is no prohibition on my part to supply the oil. Only prohibition is that it is affecting my profitability. So that is not a prohibition. That is not an hindrance. So I hope that that is clear what I meant by that statement.
Okay, Karen, I believe that is fine as of now. Now I'll move on to next query. It's from Harpreet Saini. She says, "Sir, during this period, COVID-19, employer suspend his employee, and employer said that now we do not need any employee. In this case, what was the step taken by the employee?"
Employee, actually, it is the discretion of the employer whether that termination is actually legal or illegal. That has to be taken into consideration. Whether the notice
Exactly. Right.
period, whether the employee has served the notice period or not. If not, whether the employer is paying the salary for that notice period or not, that has to be looked into. Otherwise, the employer and employee should renegotiate with respect to the salary structure, and the employee cannot say that you cannot terminate his employment.
Right. Okay. So now we come to another one more question. This is coming from Namandeep. Namandeep says, can one may claim suspension of rent for the period of non-availability of rented premises due to closure of markets on account of COVID-19 outbreak? Like, I think he's trying to, the question is related something to what I discussed perhaps. He
It,
says,
it,
can, it
what
says,
is what is
can,
the question is to ask the to defer the payment of rent.
yeah, I believe this is what it's meant. Can one may claim suspension of rent? Yeah, defer the payment of rent,
Yes,
basically.
yes. There
Yeah,
are
that's an
there,
option. Yeah.
yeah. The tenant can ask for the suspension of rent, or ask for this restructuring of the rent. Can ask for the moratorium also, that I want to defer my payment of the rent to the landlord. That is very much possible. That is between the landlord and the tenant. Suppose landlord does not agree to the suspension, then the contract or the relationship between them will be terminated.
Right, sir. Okay. Then there is one more question, Gagan sir, from Vivek Badoni. Says, sir, how do you see the orders by Delhi government to landlords directing not to collect rent from their tenants?
If there is any such order, that order is itself an illegal order, because you cannot prohibit landlord from asking or from seeking rent. That's the legal right of a landlord, because landlord has given his premises, which is emanating from the transfer of property and is nowhere connected to the situation outside, that is COVID-19. So there is no prohibition. The landlord has given his property for the given peaceful possession to the tenant. So now the tenant has to prove that he is not in a position to discharge his financial obligations due to COVID-19 situation. Just merely invoking force majeure clause by tenant will not be sufficient.
Right. Uh, right. Okay. I think that's the crux of the discussion which I started perhaps, because that is what lot of it provoked a lot of our attendees, because we see these like there are private basically contractual relations, and someone may not be prevented. So as you said that that order is technically illegal, and I was just trying to ask the same thing some time back, that is the government empowered to do so? Maybe government is may do so in certain situations, and they may restrain, especially government officers or government bodies. But just restraining private persons may just be an appeal. I think is at best. I
Yeah,
think
there can be a request.
there
There can
can
be a
be a
request by the
request.
government. Yes. Otherwise,
Yeah.
otherwise that
So,
order
but
will be otherwise that order will be unconstitutional.
yeah, I understand. I understand. But still, Gagan sir, I was just wondering if the intent of the law is, somehow not the settle the tension. And this is one of the very, I think, tough nut. This is going to be sort of tough nut in times to come, because as the dust settles down on the COVID-19, or somewhat it settles down, I believe there may be a surge in such number of cases in the courtrooms.
Right. Right.
Okay.
So,
So now I there are some more messages coming up. Okay. Okay. I think it's continuation to something what we were discussing. Sir, I want to know as to whether the pronouncement made by the government about the waiver of rent is pending in the Supreme Court, or is it enforceable?
come again. What is the question, Sunil?
It says, sir, in the I want to know whether the pronouncement made by the government about the waiver of rent is pending in Supreme Court, or is it enforceable? It's by Princeton, an international student, so he is familiar with the working of the law. He has been our student, but
Okay.
Princeton, if I would just add before Gagan sir explains, as we have discussed here, that government can appeal, and if there is any order passed by the Delhi government regarding the not to take the rent, then it is illegal to start with. That has been shared by our guest here. I think you are asking further whether it is pending in Supreme Court. I think, to my knowledge, Gagan sir, is there anything
No,
pending
it has
in Supreme
no.
Court about this?
What I think, what
About
we
the validity of the government order to not to take
so
rent?
it is pertaining to actually lawyers. Lawyers approach the Apex Court for waiving of the
Okay,
rent,
okay,
where the
okay,
Apex Court ruled that we will not
okay.
where the apex court actually ruled against the lawyers, saying that
Right.
we will not intervene with respect to
Okay.
the payment of rent, because it will
Okay.
open up the Pandora's box, and
Right.
every tenant will come before the court and seek exemption from the payment of rent. So that is no more pending before the apex court. The apex court has decided against the petitioners, that is the lawyer community, saying that they will not interfere in the payment of rent.
Okay. Okay. So that's a good great. Fine. Fine. So now with that answer, Princeton, I believe that satisfies your query. So we move on to another query by Vivek, and he says, sir, in the absence of any rent agreement, which is practically in most of the cases in Punjab, can a tenant get relief of repossession under specific relief act if he is forcefully evicted?
Yes, because law does not recognize unlawful possession. So if somebody has been evicted unlawfully, then he can be put into possession back under
Okay.
section 9 of specific relief act, and under section 6 if that is in the during this 6 months period.
Okay.
So these two are the provisions which recognize that evict you cannot forcefully evict anybody from the possession, even if that possession is unlawful.
Right. Right. Uh, Sir, one more question is coming. I believe that answers Vivek's query. Then there is a query from Mr. Rajesh. Says, sir, for the contract, do only parties are required to sign it, or is there any other authority also?
No, you need two witnesses besides the parties to the contract. There is no requirement of any other authority.
So I think that answers the question, Rajesh. It is very practical query and very relevant. Yes, you do not need any authority. You can abide by the contractual law of the land. You can fulfill the requirements, and you need two witnesses, and only the signature of the parties appended to the particular contract agreement will be sufficient. I believe that's how it is, Gagan sir.
Yeah, just to add on to that, depending on whether the contract is with respect to an immovable property or is with respect to payment of rent which exceeds 100 rupees, then
Yes.
that needs a compulsory registration also.
Registration under, yes,
Yeah.
right. That's also
Otherwise,
very important. Right, right.
otherwise any two parties can enter into a contract on a plain piece of paper
Right.
without getting the same registered. So the
Right.
Registration Act will prevail in case of the documents which need registration.
Right. So I believe that would be most likely cases of immovable property only.
Yes. Yes.
Right. So in cases of immovable property, if I am correctly recalling, that is, I think, section 19, that is section 47, I think, of the Indian Registration Act.
Correct. Absolutely correct. Absolutely.
Right. Fine. So I think that is the outcome. Okay. So now there's one more query coming up. This is from Rashi. Rashi wants to know, sir, can academic fee taken by the institutions also be waived if we apply the concept of force majeure due to COVID-19?
Oh yeah, that's a very interesting question, Sunil. That whether this fees can be waived off by invoking this clause. Now, the obligation of the students is to pay these fees. Now, it has to be
Right.
seen whether the student is prohibited from the discharge of his financial obligations. So the answer is actually no, because
Okay.
schools, colleges, they are seeking tuition fees from the students. So the tuition fees component of your total fees cannot be waived off, and the institution is discharging its obligation by taking uh, online teaching. So hence there is a performance of the contract. So seeking waiving of their tuition fees will be misplaced.
I think right now I was reading in the papers that I think only the taking of the tuition fee is being insisted upon. And I think the Punjab government had passed a stricture in this regard, that those private institutions who are charging anything apart from the tuition fees, are being, an explanation has been sought from them.
Yes, same is the situation in Delhi. So Delhi has also asked its schools to only charge for tuition fees, and that too on a monthly basis.
Right, sir. Okay. Okay. So I believe that answers your question. It was asked by Rashi. Then the question again from Vivek is coming. Vivek wants to know, sir, one can't be evicted forcefully, but will it be same if there is no formal rent agreement? I think he's asking in relation to the question of forceful eviction, which was just asked some time back.
If you can repeat, Sunil, what he mean,
I
what is that? Yeah.
I think he's asking in relation to the question where Vivek had previously asked that in the absence of any rent agreement, can a tenant get relief of repossession? So I believe it was answered by your good self that
Oh
yes,
yes,
he if
you mean
someone is if some
no, no.
okay,
Suppose there is a formal rent agreement between a landlord and a tenant, and landlord wants to
right,
evict the tenant, then landlord
right,
cannot do it forcefully. Landlord
yes,
has
he
to
cannot
follow landlord has to
a
follow the
procedure
due process of law to get the
exactly,
tenant evicted.
right, sir,
Because
right,
tenant also has the rights in that property. So
right,
the law does not recognize prohibition of any law or prohibition of the rights of or the hindrance of the exercise of rights by the tenant.
right,
So the answer is no.
right, okay.
The landlord cannot forcefully evict the tenant.
Okay, fine. I think that answers your question, Vivek, and I think that's a good sort of, people have got into thinking mode. So I can see that a lot of interesting queries, and I think that it's a good sign that there are a lot of queries coming up in this regard. And I am just taking up another question from Princeton. We are currently in a situation where the landlord is asking us to pay for the month of April according to the Home Ministry notice issue regarding the waiver of 1 month. I think he's an international student, so he's a bit concerned about this aspect. So he's asking this. So
Yeah.
maybe if
So
you can add something more.
best the best scenario would be that if you can seek moratorium from the landlord, or you can seek reformation of the contract between you and the landlord.
बाहर जाओ यहाँ से.
I hope that answers, Sunil, that query.
Yes, I think that answers the query, and I believe that what was a very wonderful session of queries also, which could take up. But however, I still ask. There are a lot of attendees which are who have been here throughout, and we are grateful for so many queries also, and it gave us a lot of opportunity to deliberate on the issues of contractual law. If there is still anything bothering anyone, you may just put it across to our guest speaker, and I think he'll be delighted to discuss it before we proceed to close this wonderful workshop session, which could materialize. And I'm really happy that it had a very great response. And so anyone who still has something bothering me, please go ahead and ask. I could see that.
Thanks,
Yes,
thanks, Sunil,
yes,
for organizing this, and for to all the participants who
yes, especially to the participants who have made it a success.
yes, and I hope that they benefited out of this discussion. As far as I am concerned, I am not the same person who entered before the discussion. So all these queries have actually changed me as a person.
Right, right. I believe that's really great. And because there are issues, but it's always a good occasion to get together and discuss. And the response was also very great. The response was also very great in this workshop, and I'm really happy for this. So Punjab government, there was one last query coming up from Vivek. Punjab government said it will allow only tuition fee by educational institutes in accordance with orders of Delhi High Court. Can Delhi High Court orders have a binding effect on Punjab government
No,
too?
no.
No, actually, no, Vivek. As you know, that it will only have effect in Delhi. So that's a
It will
territorial
only have
thing.
a referral effect.
Referral effect. Persuasive effect at best.
Yes, yes.
Then Mandeep is asking if in case of default of payment of rent, this will be the last question I'll be taking up now, friends. In case of default of payment of rent by the lessee and mode of transaction was cash, which was also specifically mentioned in lease agreement, and no such cash receipts were generated by the landlord. So whether the landlord can file suit for recovery in case of absence of any conclusive proof. Okay.
No, then the landlord will rely upon the circumstantial evidence or oral evidence, I would say, in the absence
Right.
of any proof.
Right.
Yeah, otherwise it will be very difficult
Okay.
for the landlord.
Exactly.
The dispute will be
So,
actually on the quantum of rent, because the relationship between you will be anyways be proven that you were that you are a tenant and the other party is a landlord. So the only question which will be left is how much is the rent.
Right. I think that answers your question. Now there's one compliment coming here, Gagan sir, and I would take note of that. That's by Princess Tello, an international student with us. She says, this session was very educative to me and I appreciate you both your efforts. So I think it's a live feedback coming. So there are no secrets here. So I congratulate you, sir, for on that note. And on that positive note, I bring this session to an end. So
Thank
I
you,
hope
Sunil.
you also enjoyed.
I would request everybody to stay healthy and stay safe.
Surely, surely. And it was wonderful to associate with Niti Nyay law officers for two great, wonderful sessions, which were equally, the response was equally good. And I could say at one point of time, it was a great number of people today, and the responses even crossed 107. So I could, Namandeep also says, it is thanking mainly a few members and also our guest speaker for very much informative and productive. Thank you, everyone, all the participants. We look for more such sessions. I will be sharing the live feedback, what you are sharing with us here. It is being recorded also. It is with Gagan sir already. And also, we'll take this forward.
I will share the recording. Yeah. No, so no need to worry about those slides. I will be sharing the recording with Sunil, and he can circulate.
Great. Right. So for the last session, we could not, I think, record due to that thing. So you may the slide kindly.
Right.
So I would circulate it for those members who could not, at least and faculty members. And as we like to forward in the future also through professional engagement.
Sure.
Right, Gagan sir?
Yes.
Lovely. So it's great. It's great partnering with you, dear, here. And our best wishes to Niti and losses. And we also take care, stay safe, and we.
Thank you, Sunil. Okay, bye.